All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into four incredibly dark tales to really understand why, according to lore, spirits remain tethered to our world. We're talking betrayal, tragedy, and some seriously dark curses. We're going to break down the fascinating narrative mechanics behind this deeply unsettling supernatural folklore. We'll look at exactly how these stories construct their horror and what they tell us about the unfinished business of wandering souls. Every shadow is not a ghost, and every fear is not a lie. This chilling quote perfectly captures our core premise today. Look, we aren't here to debate whether or not the paranormal is real. Instead, think of us as your impartial guides through these supernatural case files. As you'll see, these legends use raw human emotion, specifically grief, guilt, and vengeance, as the ultimate anchor that keeps these entities trapped in our realm. So let's get into case number 1, The Shadow of Flat 18, the tragedy of a cursed home. Okay, picture this. Our story revolves around a young couple, Ronik and his wife Johi, who happens to be 7 months pregnant. They move into this seemingly normal apartment, completely clueless about the dark history soaked into its walls. And right from the get-go, things are just deeply unsettling. The building's guard, he literally reacts with pure terror just from seeing that Johi is pregnant. And this haunting isn't your standard bump in the night. It is physical. Johi actually feels a burning, rough hand grabbing her unborn child in the dark. The narrative even escalates to lethal collateral damage. A black cat morphs into a shadow and lets out a wail so completely terrifying that it causes their newly hired maid to bleed from her ears and drop dead on the spot. Now, in the dead of night, there's this terrifying auditory anchor echoing through the halls. Chanda hai tu mera suraj hai tu. You are my moon, you are my sun. It's a classic, comforting Hindi lullaby, right? But in the context of Flat 18, it morphs into a seriously sinister warning. It tells us that this entity isn't just some mindless force. It's deeply maternal and tragically fixated on children. And the reason for this maternal fixation comes down to a horrifying cycle of betrayal. According to the legend, the flat's previous occupant was a woman who lost her mind due to infertility. She started treating a doll like her actual baby. So her desperate husband hired a surrogate, but the surrogate flipped the script and blackmailed him into a marriage. In a truly sickening twist, the husband burned his first wife and her doll alive just to secure his new family. So the lore suggests the ghost caused Juhi's eventual miscarriage because simply seeing a pregnant woman triggered the agonizing memory of the surrogate who stole her life. It's a perpetual loop of vengeance. Moving right along to case number 2, Sacred Heart's Terrifying Truth, a Betrayal of Faith. Here we transition away from domestic tragedy and step into institutional horror. This is where the very people meant to provide sanctuary are actually the source of unspeakable darkness. Sister Maria's nightmare starts with deep melancholia, but it goes from 0 to 100, escalating into a full-blown demonic manifestation. Her body is found twisting into these unnatural contortions, almost like her limbs are made of rubber. She starts speaking in multiple languages, with overlapping voices, and eventually launches this vicious, animalistic attack on Mother Agnes. By the time Father Edmund is called in for an exorcism, things are so bad that even a single drop of holy water burns Maria's skin like corrosive acid. But as this exorcism reached its absolute peak, a terrifying question emerged that flipped the whole investigation upside down. These entities possessing Maria, they weren't just random demons looking for a joyride in a human host. They were there for a highly specific reason, summoned by a trauma that the convent had desperately tried to bury. Because it turns out, the true monsters in this case weren't the demons. They were the trusted leaders who committed a literally unspeakable crime just to protect their own facade. During the exorcism, the possessing spirit reveals that Maria had been secretly pregnant with a local priest's child, Father Neil. To avoid a scandal, Father Neil and the convent's leader, Mother Agnes, forced Maria into premature labor, and then they buried her newborn baby alive in the graveyard. It was Maria's nightly, agonizing cries over that grave that drew in the dark entities, merging with her baby's vengeful spirit to entirely take over her body. And that brings us to a climax of terrifying supernatural justice. As Father Neil and Mother Agnes try to intervene in the exorcism, this unseen force just lifts them straight into the air. Spontaneous flames from the altar candles ignite their clothes and they burn alive as punishment for their sins. Maria is finally freed from the possession. She survives the ordeal, but tragically, she's forever burdened by the trauma of what was done to her. All right, on to case number 3. The library's untold secret. Justice from the grave. This next haunting takes place on a college campus, specifically inside an abandoned third-floor library that has terrified students for years. Investigators actually brought in modern tools to uncover the truth, and it led to a terrifying 4-day escalation of supernatural energy. On day 1, EMF meters go totally wild and flashlights just instantly die. By day 2, the entity is draining all mobile phone batteries from full to zero in minutes while literally launching books off the shelves. Day 3 brings violent poltergeist activity and freezing winds. All of this culminates on the crucial 4th night, where a spiritual leader, Satyadev Baba, is brought in to intervene. So what was the goal here? The core concept is Mukti, or liberation. The lore explains that this librarian wasn't malicious at all. She was simply a victim, murdered 20 years ago by a professor and framed for suicide. She really just needed her truth acknowledged so she could find peace. The haunting wasn't an attack. It was a desperate cry for justice. She communicated that she was trapped because her death was a lie, and no one had ever performed her final rites. Once Satyadev Baba offered the ceremonial clothes and performed those rites, granting her mukti, the haunting completely stopped. Let's look at our final file. Case number 4. Varicus's Bloody Cycle, the Cursed Forest. For this one, we're leaving buildings behind and stepping into the terrifying, endless cycle of a cursed wilderness. This narrative really taps into that primal fear of getting hopelessly lost in the woods. The trap starts with sensory misdirection. 2 friends, Anandi and Preksha, are deliberately pointed deep into a forest by a local fruit vendor. The exact second they enter, their GPS dies. As they wander, this unnatural, sweet smell of bridal henna fills the heavy air, which is completely out of place in a wild forest. And eventually, they stumble upon a sluggish river where the water is thick and dark red. Then, the entity, appearing in a bridal gown, speaks. I didn't kill her. I made her immortal. My palanquin will lift today. Be my bridesmaid. This chilling dialogue perfectly captures the twisted motive of the ghost known as Varicus. You see, she doesn't see herself as a murderer. In her mind, she's preserving these young women. She thinks she's ensuring they never age, never face the betrayals of life, by forcing them into eternal servitude for a wedding that is never, ever going to happen. This entity is basically operating a perpetual motion machine of supernatural murder, fueled entirely by an obsession with completing her wedding day. Long ago, Varicus and her bridal party died falling into a gorge. Now, she's trapped in this loop, constantly trying to recreate her wedding. She even uses a living accomplice, that fruit vendor, to constantly lure new victims into the woods. She drowns them in that river of blood, expanding her ghostly bridal party. And the absolute worst part? The very next day, the vendor resets the trap for the next group of unsuspecting campers. Which brings us to Section 5, Are You Safe? Reviewing the case files. We've explored 4 very different narratives of the supernatural today. When we take a step back and piece this investigation together, we start to see distinct motives that bind these souls to our world. The betrayed wife in Flat 18, she is driven by blinding vengeance. The demons at Sacred Heart act as a dark, retributive justice against hypocritical leaders. The librarian, on the other hand, simply wants the truth exposed for her salvation. And Varicus operates like a force of nature, endlessly repeating a tragedy. These stories remind us that a haunting is rarely random. It's almost always a profound, unresolved human emotion left to echo in the dark. Based on these tales, I'll leave you with one final thought to ponder tonight. As you look around the room you're sitting in right now, do you truly know the history of the walls around you? Or could you be living in your very own flat number 18? Thanks for exploring this lore with me. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.